Joining us now in a CNBC exclusive, Coca-Cola President and CEO James Quincey from Atlanta this morning. Thanks for joining us again. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So overall, a pretty strong picture of the business, James. How are you explaining that miss in North America sales?
Yeah, look, we had a good quarter overall. We had strong top-line growth, good operating income, and some EPS growth. North America, really, actually, one has to look through the numbers. There's a couple of temporal factors in there that are affecting the second quarter, some business mix and some timing issues. Actually, in the marketplace, the business continues to do well. Volume's up, pricing's up. We're gaining share. So we have to look through these factors, and we'll see the underlying results come in line with the marketplace success going into the second half of the year. So more temporary than structural, part of a good overall story for the year to date.
Yeah, I mean, I think you also blame rising freight costs, which a number of other consumer companies saw. Can you tell us a little bit about the commodity inflation cost input story you're seeing, whether it's higher steel and aluminum costs as a result of the tariffs or commodity costs overall? How big of a problem is this?
Yeah, look, there's some pretty broad-based cost increases out there. The freight one that I know other people have talked at appears as a reduction to revenue under the accounting for 2018. But there's broad-based cost inflation out there. We had to take with our bottling partners an increase on our sparkling beverage industry in the middle of the year, which is relatively uncommon. And that's the freight, that's the metals, the steel, the aluminum going up, the labor going up. So there is cost pressure. We're having to pass that through into the marketplace. We're not perhaps the most affected sector, but it's out there, and we've had to take the price increase. But I think it's gone well. The customer conversations, obviously, it's not a comfortable conversation, but they can see what's happening. And I think we're all going to try and find a way to say, how do we continue to grow our collective businesses in this environment? That's how we focus the conversations with the customers, and how do we keep consumers engaged and interested in the beverage categories. So far, so good in terms of what we can see in the marketplace.
But just to be clear, you're talking about actually raising the price of sodas for consumers because of this tariff inflation.
Yeah, I mean, the general cost inputs, the tariffs on the metals, it's one of many factors. Caused us to go out in the middle of the year with our bottling partners and announce a price increase, which is pretty unusual. But it was the right thing to do for the business for the long term. I'm sure the customers are passing those prices on through. So yeah, there's some pressure in the system. We're passing it through, but of course we're focused on how do we adapt, how do we do it in an intelligent way so we have the right packaging price options for different consumers.
So what I'm trying to figure out, James, the better results, across brand Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, the narrative on the industry has been for so many years, fewer Americans are drinking carbonated beverages. Has that changed? Have we seen an inflection point, or are you just getting more aggressive taking market share from your competitor, Pepsi?
I think what you're seeing is a consumer re-engagement with the category, more moderately perhaps in the US, but globally it's happening because we've been driving a strategy that's very focused on allowing people to engage more simply in a modern way with the category. We've got smaller packages, we've been doing reformulation so there's less sugar, we've been innovating behind our no sugar brands, and that's been a particular driver of performance in the US. Diet Coke has been growing revenues. It's basically a break-even on volume, which is a great improvement over the past years. Coke Zero Sugar is continuing to grow volume and revenues in double digits. So we see our strategy of focusing on transactions, smaller packages, innovation, and zero sugar as a way to bring people more engaged with the sparkling category, and you can see it in our results in the US and in globally. But at the end of the day, people want diversity of beverages. So this isn't just about reinvigorating the sparkling category, which we're doing. It's also about winning in some of these other categories, which we're making great progress on. People want diversity, and they want the brands they love.
James, as it comes to these input costs and the degree to which they're tied to tariffs, we've seen different companies be vocal to different degrees when it comes to trying to influence policy or roll back policy or influence policy. Companies like GM and Toyota and Union Pacific are very direct when speaking to the administration in public. How does Coke think about how you should address this in public?
Yeah, look, clearly metal input costs for us are a factor, but they're not as big a factor as for some of the companies you just mentioned. I mean, our focus from a policy point of view is to say, look, we still believe in global trade. We think global trade can lift all boats. Yes, there might be consequences, but it's better to mitigate the consequences than to unravel global trade. So whilst none of these deals are perfect and they can all be made better, we advocate for moving forward, for improving them. And so that's the position we take. We're not a primary direct impact from some of these tariffs, but of course it flows through our supply chain in all sorts of different ways, and ultimately that will have to pass through.
I mean, what would happen, you've got a pretty robust business in China, as we saw today. What would happen if we saw all $500 billion worth of imports from China to the U.S. get taxed? Is there any impact on Coke? And do you worry about anti-American sentiment and boycotts of big American brands like Coca-Cola over there?
Yeah, of course, if we get to the very extreme scenarios and boycotts, it'll be bad, and ultimately it'll be bad for everyone. One of the great strengths of the Coca-Cola business is that actually virtually every drink that someone consumes is made in the country in which they're consuming it in. So the Cokes in China are made in China, the Cokes in the US are made in the US, the Cokes in Europe are made in Europe. So I think we're very focused on creating local businesses with local factories, with local jobs, with local blue collar, with local trucks, with local distribution. And that's a great insulation. Of course, we get impacted by the overall environment because less trade and more tariffs will mean less economic growth in the end, and that will affect us. But I think one of the great strengths of our business is that we are globally local.
Wanted to, as we're taking a trip around the world, James, go to the UK, your native country, which actually saw in April that sugar tax take effect. What sort of adjustments have you made to some of the beverages to try to keep the sugar content lower, and what's been the customer reaction?
Yeah, I mean, the UK came in with a graduated taxation on sugared beverages. And what we did in the UK is really a reflection of what we're trying to do everywhere with our strategy. So we're trying to make the packages smaller, so that those that do have the sugar in, they can be drunk in a smallish package size. But we reformulated a lot of products. Virtually every product we sell has moved out of the tax bracket. And so this whole idea of smaller packages, reformulations to bring down the sugar levels, innovations, has been our response in the UK, but it's actually part of our global strategy to adapt to what consumers want. So when you look at the GB business, because we'd implemented that strategy very proactively, actually the business did reasonably well in the second quarter. It was down, but it was just down a little bit despite the implementation of this regime.
What's driving the sparkling water trend? Also noticed really strong results from Topo Chico. I know Dasani sparkling is working well for you. Is it all about health concerns?
I think. Look, at the end of the consumers love bubbles. They've always loved bubbles, and they still love bubbles. Sparkling water is a great alternative. People like the brands, whether it's Topo Chico, which has a fantastic taste, Dasani sparkling with some of its flavors. People are engaged with these categories. Yeah, I think they don't have the sugar in. That often they're not sweetened either. So people are engaged with them, and I think that is part of where people are moving to. But in the same vein, we've innovated on Diet Coke, and some of the Diet Coke flavors are sparkling. They're flavored. They connect with Diet Coke, and that's helping people engage. So I think there's a bit of blurring going on where are the boundaries. But the big trend is ultimately people are buying more commercial beverages. They just want a greater diversity of drinks, and preferably healthier, more natural, cleaner ingredients. But of course, within that portfolio, they still want some indulgent drinks, whether it's a lovely, great tasting Coke Original or even some of the coffee drinks.
And then finally, James, on the U.S., we're expecting this big GDP report on Friday. Could show growth of 4 to 5%. From your vantage point, is that the kind of economy you see in the U.S. in terms of consumer behavior?
I think the U.S. economy continues to do well. I like you, don't know what the number's gonna end up being, but I think the U.S. economy is doing well. Clearly, there's some inflationary pressure building up from cost inputs. The global economy continues to do well. Hopefully, global policy making will continue it on a good course and won't create too many self-inflicted problems.
James Quincey, we appreciate your time. Shedding some light on the quarter and the economy. The CEO of Coca-Cola, with shares, guys, up more than 2% now.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.